Hi guys, welcome to Build Succeeded. My name is Lucian and today we're building Asteroids. Asteroids was first released as an arcade game in 1979, developed by Atari. You control a spaceship and try to shoot all the asteroids around you. When they get shot, the asteroids can either break in half or be destroyed, depending on their size. This game influenced a lot of games in the following years, and we can find this style of game even today on Android or iOS. This game requires a bit of trigonometry, as it includes angles and rotations, so I'll start by opening an Irish lager. The basic concept we're going to work with when it comes to rotation is where exactly a point that is at a certain distance away from the rotation center is going to end up. So let's consider the x and y axis, with the center being at 0, 0. The position of a pixel that is n pixels away from the center straight up is 0, n. 0 on the x-axis and on the y-axis. If the pixel is 90 degrees to the right, it will be at n, 0. N on the x-axis, 0, and the y-axis. What if the pixel is at an arbitrary angle? The formulas to calculate the distance in 2D space is simple. X equals n multiplied by sinus of the angle, and y equals n multiplied by cosinus of the angle, which, if we apply to 0 degrees or 90 degrees, will get these results correctly. In our case, we have a minus on the y formula because in the graphical screen the x-axis is 0 at the top and goes down to the maximum resolution. So it's the other way around compared to trigonometry graphics. Knowing this, let's build a ship. The ship will be a triangle and there are 3 points. First, the front of the ship. The position is calculated as described above, where n is 30 pixels and the angle is the current angle of the ship. Second, the right corner of the ship. This point is also calculated as above, except the n is 15 pixels and the angle is the current angle of the ship plus 120 degrees. Lastly, the left corner of the ship. Similar to the right corner, but the angle is the current angle of the ship minus 120 degrees. Using these 3 calculated points, we can draw the ship as a triangle. Now let's talk about asteroids. In the original game, there were a few predefined shapes of asteroids. But for this game, I want to generate random shapes. So when I initialize the asteroid, I generate 9 somewhat random distances from the center. These distances will represent points 40 degrees apart. Calculating based on the formulas above and the rotation of the asteroid, then joining these points, we get a randomly shaped asteroid. Okay, enough trigonometry. Let's get to the game engine. We need to capture the left, right, up and space keys. We'll use left and right to rotate the ship, up to accelerate, and space to fire. In this section, we just set some variables to know when the keys are pressed. We'll handle the logic below. In this section, we need to handle 3 elements. First, the ship. The ship has a position and a speed in 2D space, represented by x and y. Also, a rotation angle. When the left and right keys are pressed, we change the rotation angle. When the up key is pressed, we accelerate the ship, which means we change the x and y part of the speed. I know I said no more trigonometry, but the way we change the speed depends on the current angle of the ship. So we change x and y parts of the speed using the sinus and cosinus of the ship's angle. Second, the asteroids. They also have a position, speed, and a rotation angle. but they also have a rotation speed, because they rotate by themselves. All of these are generated randomly when the asteroid is initialized. So with every frame, the asteroid will move and rotate constantly. For both ship and asteroids, there is another element to take care of. When the ship or asteroid gets outside the screen area, it needs to pop up on the other side of the screen. We didn't talk about these yet, but we do need projectiles. Projectiles are fired from the ship, so their position and direction depends on the position and direction of the ship when we press fire. Again, we can apply sinus and cosinus to the ship's rotation to get the x and y part of the speed of the projectile. Compared to the ship and asteroids, the projectiles can't pop up on the other side of the screen. They will just disappear when they go outside the screen area. So far so good, but just having these elements on the screen does not make the game very fun. They do need to interact with each other, and we implement that using collision detection. Let's talk about the projectile to asteroid collision. When these two collide, the projectile will be eliminated. Also, the asteroid will either be split in half or destroyed, depending on its size. They all start with size 4. When they get hit, they split into 2 asteroids of size 2. When one of these gets hit, they will split into 2 asteroids of size 1. When an asteroid of size 1 is hit, it will be destroyed. Now, ship to asteroid collision. In this case, the ship will be destroyed and the player loses a life. Nothing happens to the asteroid. After all, it's made of rock. For any of the collisions above, we can detect it by measuring the distance between the center of the asteroid and the location of the ship or projectile. If that distance is smaller than the size of the asteroid, boom, collision. Now the only thing left to do is to draw the ship, projectiles and asteroids. Let's put this into code. The asteroid class has 2 constructors. The first one is used at the beginning of the game to generate random asteroids on the screen. Every variable here is randomly generated. The second constructor is used when an asteroid is hit and 2 other asteroids are generated. That's why it accepts a position and the speed. In the advanced method, we move the asteroid around, except for when the asteroid is destroyed, in which case size is 0. I've added some explosions in the game, so when size is 0, it means the asteroid is actually exploding. The explode method sets the asteroid in explosion mode because it was hit. Lastly, the draw method. What this will draw depends on which state the asteroid is in. If size is greater than 0, the asteroid will be drawn using the 9 randomly generated points. Otherwise, the asteroid explosion will be drawn as 9 points moving away from the center. The ship class also has 2 constructors. The first one is for the regular playtime ship. The other is for the ships I display on the corner of the screen as lives. The reset method resets the ship in the middle of the screen. It's used when we initially generate the ship, as well as when we need to reset it after losing a life. Then we have apply left rotation and apply right rotation, which will simply rotate the ship. Apply acceleration changes the speed of the ship in the direction it's facing, making sure not to go over a maximum speed. The advanced method applies the speed to the position, thus moving the ship on the screen. I've also implemented the explosion mode for the ship, so we have the explode method as well as a big if in the draw method. When the ship is alive, we draw it as a triangle. In the projectile class, I have just one constructor, as the projectile can only be created by a ship firing. It receives the position and speed. Advanced simply moves the projectile forward. then isOut returns true if the projectile went outside the screen. Then draw will just create a small circle at the position of the projectile. In the constructor of the main engine class, we initialize the ship and 6 asteroids. We set some other basic variables used to detect key presses. We use key up and key down methods to detect user input. The logic for these are handled below. The logic method is where all the logic happens. First, we handle the user input and its effect on the ship, rotation, acceleration, and firing projectiles. You can see we generate a new projectile every time we hit space. Then we handle the ship logic. We just advance the ship, then we have some code to handle ship explosion and reset. Then we have the projectile logic, where we advance the projectile and remove it if it's outside the play area. And we have the asteroid logic. We advance each asteroid, then we check for explosions being finished to remove the asteroid from the list after it explodes. Afterwards, we handle collisions. First, between asteroids and projectiles. We do this by calculating the distance between each asteroid and projectile, and if the distance is small enough, we have a collision, in which case we remove the projectile and either split or explode the asteroid based on its size. Then the collision between asteroids and the ship. Similar to the above, we calculate distance, and if it's small enough, we explode the ship. Finally, the draw method will draw all the game elements: ship, projectiles, and asteroids. So this is my implementation of the Asteroids game. As you saw in the code, I've added 3 extra lives for the player and basic explosion effects when the ship or an asteroid explodes. Feel free to take a look at the code in GitHub to see how I've implemented the game and play around with the code. Thank you for watching my video. I have more projects like this on my channel, so feel free to check it out and subscribe if you want to see more cool game development projects in the future. See you soon!